page that I have here for about 10, so I made a few.
Yes, I would like one.
Well, of course, everyone should want one. But anyways, I have them here. They'll be available after the service. And the books are in the back. I think Charlie has about 10 books. If we need more books, let me know. We have 6 left. So I don't want to give these to everybody, just the ones that want a book. And the reason for that is I'm just throwing them away. Not everybody wants a book, I don't think. Okay. Somewhere I lost control. He's got one. You got another book? You gonna have 2? All right. Anyways, I have a few more of these, 4 or 5. Yeah. I was looking at I'm getting ready to move out of my office. I'm retiring after the first of the year, and I'm trying to getting ready to move out of my office downtown. And I was looking at all of the books I had, and all the books of Genesis, all the lessons that I taught of Genesis, Revelation, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, Jude, Hebrews. Most of y'all was here for Hebrews, and John. Anyways, it's building a little bit of a library. Several hours of work, but when I started teaching some years back, I decided if I'm going to spend the time and type it all up, I'll just give it to you guys if you want it, you know. And it doesn't really cost me that much to do it. It takes a little more time, but if you keep them, you have a little bit of a commentary on. Although, if mine gets a lot of scribble marks on it, and so, anyways, Genesis is where we are today. The beginning. Word means beginning. I have the whole chapter of Genesis, first chapter 1, in the lesson. I'm not sure, well, I'm pretty sure that we'll not get through that in this lesson. And a lot of what I'm going to teach today is not in your notes. We'll do the best we can to get to the notes before the end of the service, but a lot of what I'm going to teach is not in the notes. You've got to get prepared. All right. This is going to be awkward the way things are now. I'm over here. I've got a lot of the instruments, and it's the way things are situated. I've been talking with Matthew about somehow if we could put it up on the screens. What's that?
We can. Deal. Nice. With your iPad, you can write on your iPad.
I understand that.
Okay.
No, I don't mean that disrespectful. I mean, it's just we've been working on how to do it. And if we can, because right now the way things are situated, there's no possible way for everybody to see the note. And plus, you in the back can't see the notes very well anyway. But it's okay. Most of this is just me. This is just how I talk, I guess, or something like that. So, Genesis chapter 1. And we will take the whole chapter today. But first, we want to do a little bit of an introduction to the book of Genesis. And what I want to talk about for just a few moments here is this book. And these first chapters of Genesis are unique to the rest of the Bible. Actually, the first verse is perhaps the most important verse in the Word of God, because it presents to us a God, the God, the creator of everything. And we want to get to that. But who wrote this book? Now, in essence, God wrote the book. You all understand that, right? I mean, there's not anything, this Bible that we have, and as by the way, the Old Testament has been around a lot longer than the New Testament. And I love the Old Testament. The Old Testament complements the New Testament. The Old Testament gives us things that the New Testament fulfills. There's prophecies and doctrines in the Old Testament that are fulfilled through Christ in the New Testament. And we're going to see a lot of information right off the bat that is very, very important in our life. So who wrote the book of Genesis? We know who wrote the book of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And those books were written pretty much by Moses. And so what gave Moses the authority, or who gave Moses the authority to write these books? And understand that Moses wrote this first book, the first chapter, something like 2,500 years after this chapter happened. So that's something that's interesting, because how would he know 2,500 years later what happened on creation day and how creation happened? Now, who is Moses? And what gives him that authority to write like he did? Well, if we follow, and as you know, I enjoy genealogies. They're in the Bible for a reason. Now, most of the time people find them very boring, but I think they all lead us to a conclusion. We have, at the beginning, where we're going to start is Adam. And Adam basically means from the dirt, Adam. And so a tiller of dirt, from the dirt, is Adam. And Adam, in that first time, takes us all the way through. Well, we know that Cain and Abel. Cain slew Abel, and so that did away with those two. And so we go from Seth, and Enos, and then some others down to Enoch. And Enoch was the seventh from Adam. And so from Enoch, we go down to Methuselah, and then we go to Lamech, and then we go to Noah. Now, here's why this is important. Adam lived 930 years. Adam was created by God. And I'm going to explain something to you here in a little bit, that man cannot create. Man cannot create. And I'm going to explain that in just a little bit. Adam died in the 56th year of Lamech. So Adam lived all the way down there. Can you imagine that funeral? This man was created. He wasn't born of anybody. You understand that? Seth was born of man and woman. Enos was born of man and woman. Enoch was born of man and woman. As a matter of fact, this is important because Enoch walked with God and was not, for God took him. So we know that Adam has passed down the history of God's creation because he was created, right? How do you forget that? How do you forget that? Adam was created, and Adam passed this history down through generation through generation through generation. They didn't have notebooks and computers, things like that. They had a memory. And so through history, this happened. Now, what is also amazing is these people went on and had millions or hundreds of children. All of those children, except for these, were fallen creatures, or most of them. We know that in the time of Noah, everybody denied God except for Noah. And so, but what we have here is all the way down into the 56th year of Lamech, we have Adam's alive and passing down the history unto these men. And Lamech, of course, the father of Noah. And Noah lived after that. And Noah carried it on through the flood. What is Noah's first act after he got off of the ark? He built an altar. Second thing he did is got drunk, built a vineyard. And he paid for that. So from Noah, we have down. From Noah, we go down and we have Japheth, and we have Shem, and we have Ham. These are his three sons. Now, when we get to this, and I think I may have put down a time here somewhere, chapter 9, I think verse number 27, it tells us that God's passing the mantle down through Noah, through Shem. Japheth settles in Europe. Ham, basically, because of Ham's sin with Noah, he saw Noah's nakedness. By the way, he didn't just see Noah's nakedness, he acted upon Noah's nakedness. Noah got drunk, laying in his tent, naked. His son Ham went in, and there was something that occurred that caused a curse to be put on Ham. And the curse was not put on Ham, it was put on Canaan. Cursed be Canaan for thy sake. A servant of servants shall he be all the days of his life. The descendants of Ham settled in Africa, in Liberia, in Egypt, in Sudan, and mostly in Africa, and also the land of Canaan. Shem went to the east, settled in the Middle East, Iraq, Iran, and from there on over. And so that's how they settled. Now, from Shem, about 9 generations, comes Abraham. Or Abram is what he's first called. So from Shem, it was passed down all the way through the history of Noah. What Noah knew was passed down through Shem all the way down to Abraham. Now, Abraham's father was a idol worshiper. But Abraham loved God, and his faith was recognized by God, and Abraham was where the blessing passed on through Abraham. And then, of course, we know Isaac, and then Jacob. What was Jacob's name changed to? Jacob's name was changed to what? Israel. Jacob had a pretty large family. He wanted to marry Rachel, and I'm not going to get into a whole lot of this, but Rachel and Bilhah was her servant. And then you had Leah, and her servant was Zilpah. And through these, we have children that were born. And of course, the first 4 children born was Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Then we had Bilhah that had Dan and Naphtali, I think. And I think Zilpah had Gad and Asher. Those may be reversed, I'm not sure. Then Leah produced again, and we had Issachar and Zebulun. And then we had Joseph. Joseph. And we had Benjamin. So what we have here is these were the first 4. Reuben had an affair with Bilhah, his father's wife, and that's not, you shouldn't do that. That's a bad thing. So he lost the birthright. Simeon and Levi went into I'll forget the name of the town now. But anyways, they went in and killed all the men because remember they had a daughter. Someone's in the kitchen with who? Dinah. So, anyways, what happened here is Levi, God's going to choose Levi for a special event. Judah, in Genesis 49:10, Judah is, the scepter shall not depart Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh come, and under him shall the gathering of the people be. This was he is where Jesus is going to come from. So, and Joshua, he has Ephraim and Manasseh, and the mantle went to Ephraim. But as we look here, we have Levi. We're going to pull out Levi from this equation. All of this comes, and so Levi has a son named Amram, and he marries Levi's sister named Jochebed. And they had Moses, and they had Aaron, and a lady named, you did good. Moses came out of Levi. Now, throughout all of this, it all came through Jacob. Throughout all of this, they have been, this history has been passed down from generation to generation to generation to generation. So what gives Moses, what did God do with Moses to set him up for writing these first 5 books of the Bible? And I think this, to me, is interesting. They are in Egypt. And Egypt has put a penalty upon the children of Israel. The Pharaoh died. He's put a penalty on the children of Israel. And that penalty that he put on the children of Israel was they put him basically in servitude. And so as these men are serving God, Jochebed and Amram have this son, and they try to protect this son. And so what do? They make an ark of bulrushes, and they slip this little baby in the ark and put him afloat. Now, they just didn't go down and put him afloat anywhere. They picked a place where the Pharaoh's daughter bathes. And so it floated in, the bulrushes. He cries, and she picks him up, and she takes him, and Moses spends 40 years with the Pharaoh of Egypt. During that 40 years, he receives the best education you can receive. He learns history. He learns all types of things that he learns for those 40 years. The best schools that you could possibly go to, Moses went to for those 40 years. The next 40 years for Moses was spent on the backside of the desert. A farmer. You can't get much better education than on being a farmer. I'm serious. Wisdom and things that you can receive. So he learned a lot about traditions and things like that. Out of the first 80 years, Moses had wisdom given to him by God as God placed him into places where he could learn. The next 40 years, Moses goes in, takes the children of Israel out, and they wander in the desert for 40 years. Now, still, what do we have? Moses leads 2 million people out of Egypt into a wilderness. And for 40 years, Moses is there. So now, how did Moses go to write, and how did he receive the information that we're going to be studying in these first 8 chapters of the book of Genesis? How did he receive that? How did he get that information? What is unique about Moses? Well, we find in your notes in Genesis 33:11 and Numbers 12:8, we learn something unique about Moses. We learn that God dealt with Moses on an individual basis. Now, how does God speak to you? How does God speak to you? Through prayers? That's us speaking to God more, but how does he come back and speak to you? Through the Word of God and through the Spirit of God inside of you. That's the breath of God. That's the Spirit of God. God lives inside of you through His Spirit, right? With Moses, this didn't happen that way. The Bible says that God spoke to Moses. Remember Aaron and Miriam? They come to Moses and they said, we don't have enough part in this. What makes you the leader? And God said, y'all come out here a minute, outside the walls of the city. I want to talk to you. It's there. You just have to read it. And so they go outside, and God says to them, I speak to Moses. face to face, and later he says mouth to mouth. You, and with the prophets I speak through the prophets, but with Moses it's different. I speak mouth to mouth. I speak face to face with Moses. And one other thing. Who went to, and what did he get to see? He spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and God hid him in a rock, in the cleft of the rock, and God passed by him. His Spirit passed by him. Moses saw something so great that his face, when he come down off the mountain, they may say, well, we don't believe you there. You know, I remember they went and made some golden idol and you know, thought he was dead. Well, Moses come down. Who made his face to shine so brightly that they had to cover it up? God. Moses had a relationship with God like no other man in the history of man. So now I say to you, who wrote the book of Genesis? God wrote it through Moses. And God prepared Moses to write it. Now, you can listen to the people that are a whole lot more intelligent than me, and they can explain more about it in perhaps a whole lot better way. But in my little brain, I see how God passed down through history. But then there's this part of history that is hard for anybody to understand, that God gave to Moses to write down. And he gave it to us so that we might know, so that we might understand. So what do we have in the first words of this chapter? God. I wrote, what I wrote in my letter this weekend, a little bit about this, but let me just take a moment and God, I had someone ask me the other day, are we like little ants? And God is, and you know what? In our human mind, we try to understand God. We want to. I want to. I mean, we want to understand who is God. And it's amazing that we have a God that just spoke this world into existence. Now, that's a word that you need to understand. The word is existence. The word is exist. Memorize that word. That's a hard word to memorize, right? Exist. 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 Why do we exist? Why? Why do we exist? That's a question we have to ask ourselves. Do you realize that you cannot move? You cannot look in any direction at any time and not see God. Why? How did that tree happen? How did you happen? I mentioned to you something a minute ago about create. You and I cannot create. Because I'm old, I get to tell the same story over and over again, and you just have to listen. But it's like the scientist coming up. Let's just use a preacher, for example. A scientist coming up to a preacher, and you think that you think God made man. I can make man. I can create man. And the preacher says, well, have at it. And the guy goes outside, he goes and gets a shovel and a bucket, and he fills the bucket full of dirt, and he comes in and goes past the preacher, and the preacher says, where are you going? Well, I'm going to go create man. And he said, what you got in your hand? He said, well, I have dirt. He said, well, you have to go get your own dirt. God created man. God created this earth for His purpose, for His honor, for His glory. Now, here's the thing. I was going to bring another book in and read something out of it to you, but here's the thing that throughout history, man has tried to figure out how we exist. Because we have to figure this out. You can't just go through life and not try to figure out, why do I exist? Why does this earth exist? Why does these things exist? Why? And so man has come up with this theory that two things up in heaven had an explosion one day. And then some little amoeba somewhere come out of the water and became a monkey, and then a college professor. You've heard all of the deals. The problem is existence. How did that exist to have a Big Bang? They cannot come up with a way that things existed. It has to be God. We exist because of God. All of creation cries out, there's a God, there's a God. We are here because of God. And the word exist is what we have in our hands that nobody else has. They can't explain existence. They can't. They don't have a clue. They go back. They say, well, this 250,000 years ago, this here happened, and this here happened, and this. Yes. And then we find out that these animals they're finding, they have soft flesh. How did that happen? I mean, if something is 200,000 or 300,000 years old or 1,000,000 years old, come on. To me, it's more simple and more easy to understand that God exists. Matter of fact, God existed out of nothing. Nothing existed. There was not, in God's time, there was no time. When we enter the portals of heaven, there will be no time. There'll be no clock. God existed. So he is our creator, and there's no ultimate purpose to exist. Another thing that we talked about is God created. Nothing pre-existed. We can't create anything. Anything we create or we think we create, we did not create. We make from things that were created. Do you understand that? There has nothing ever been created by man. Man has not created anything. Man makes things out of what is already existing. Existing. It exists because God created it to exist. Everything, with the exception of God, has a beginning. Prior to God's creating, there was nothing. There is no evidence of God's birth. There's no evidence of God's pre-existence. He has always existed, and He brought this world and spoke this world into existence. Now, man has tried through their own brains trying to figure out God, have found all kinds of ways, but they can't get past existence. They can't get past existence. How do we exist? No, the Big Bang don't work because something had to exist for that to happen. How did that exist? They cannot figure it out. So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And we're going to next week go through and study step by step how God created it. How God spoke. And, you know, we think with our hands like God took some putty and put this together. God just spoke it into existence. And God had a plan. Hey! Aren't you glad God had a plan? Yeah, God has a plan. I'm glad I'm not a fool that rejects God. The fool hath said in his heart, there is no God. That has to be a fool. Because how do we exist? Why do we exist? Why does that tree exist? Why does the sun exist? Why does the moon exist? Why do all the stars exist? Why does the ground exist? Why do the fish exist, except for me to eat? Why do they... and we'll go into all of that too. Exist. Listen, whenever somebody that says, I don't believe in God, well then why do you exist? Talk to me about existence. Father, thank you for today, and pray that you'll just bless these wonderful people. Bless Brother Hahn as he brings the morning message. And God, just lead us in paths of righteousness that we might honor you. The more we find out about you, the more we marvel that you would choose us at all. And yet, Lord, you've chosen us to be a part of your family. This is just beyond our imagination. But thank you, Lord. Thank you for all of these great, marvelous miracles that you've brought out in our life. In Jesus' precious name.